when investors give a term sheet and they say, oh, it's just standard, two numbers are different. It's the amount and the valuation. It's a standard term sheet otherwise. It's like one page, very simple. That is in the founder's worst interest because at the time of a term sheet is the time when you have the most leverage to negotiate.
Welcome to Money Moves, the show about raising money, making great investments, and building venture scale businesses. I'm Neil Devani, your host and the founder of Necessary Ventures, a firm investing in what the world needs. Each week, we'll talk to folks who have raised anywhere from $10 million up to billions of dollars. We'll learn how they return multiples of 10x to 100x or more to their investors. We dive into their stories, uncovering what worked and what didn't, learning from real experiences to understand the journeys of raising capital and rapidly scaling a business. Money Moves isn't just for those already in the game. It's also for anyone interested in the mechanics of startups and venture capital. Whether you want to raise money, make better investments, or just understand how it all works, Money Moves gives you the insights and advice you need to succeed. So join us each week and hear from those who've been through it all and learn from their journeys. All right, Tara, thank you so much for joining. I have so many things for us to talk about. I'm so excited for this. Knowing you for so long, there's a lot of topics for us to cover. Before we jump in, actually, I have a weird little surprise. So give me 1 second and then I'll be right back.
Uh-oh. Okay. I heard a zipper.
I'm a bat. It's Halloween and you're the queen of costumes. So I figured it's only appropriate for me to come in a costume for this episode.
I'm honored. See, the problem is that I have too many costumes and I wouldn't know which one to pick if you told me in advance. So,
I didn't want you to know because you would have then had a better costume than me and then you would have shown me up. So this is my one chance.
There's a bucket of costumes out there. So we can go with that later. We can figure that out maybe midway through, do an outfit change.
I know it was like a thing you loved costumes even before starting Rupa, but I feel like you did so well with that in terms of the conferences and like building a brand and like awareness. But like, tell me more about that. Like, how did you build that into the company?
I don't know, actually. I think that one of my like very strongly held beliefs is that the culture of the company is pretty much going to be the personalities of the core founders. And it's very hard to deviate from that. And so I think there's a sense of like the thing about my co-founder Rose and I, like we are both incredibly intense about work. And we also are just kind of like ridiculous human beings. And we've known each other since college. And I think that you absolutely know that about me. It's a little bit of just like, wild card. How do we make things fun? Like everything is entertaining, like whether it's good or it's bad, there's always like a funny story. At least like that's kind of how we see the world. And I think costumes is a natural part of that specifically for the conference. So I had basically our team wanted to spend money to go to a conference. And I said, the only way that I'm going to prove going to a conference is if we stand out. Like I have only one rule and it's no button down shirts standing behind a table, a fold out table where you're handing out like pins with the Rupa Health logo on it. Like, no, you have to stand out. You have to be memorable. And that's my only rule. If we go, we have to do that. The team basically came up with all of these ideas. They vetoed my idea of getting a giant, because we sell a lot of gut tests, poop tests, stool tests. And so my idea was, hey, let's get a giant toilet and put it in basically put it on a pedestal and then say, don't give your patients a shitty experience, because we basically create a better experience for practitioners and their patients, and then have it like toilet themed. And they said, absolutely not. And so we ended up doing like healthcare of the future, space costumes. And we were the only people at this like very formal medical conference and multiple conferences that we went to afterwards in these costumes. And it just kind of became a thing. But I'd say that is representative of our culture. It's actually not very different it's not just like a conference tactic. That's just who we are.
Yeah. It's inherent. It's not just, I get what you're saying. It's not just like to attract attention. You also have that vibe at the office. I feel like you wore a costume to the office a few times as well.
Oh yeah, many times. There was the pirate outfit. There was like, we used to do this thing, like we used to do like quarterly themes. And so you just got to keep it fresh. I think the biggest thing about culture and just like creating an environment that people want to be a part of is one, winning. Like that, you first, like the company has to do well. If the company's not doing well, like none of this stuff matters. But then there's this like, it's hard. We were a fully remote company. And so I think it's really hard to feel connection remotely. unless it's a little bit manufactured. Like you kind of have to like create that. And so I would do this like big end of quarter presentation. And by the third one, and it would go over all of our wins, all the funny moments. Like I'd screenshot like things people said in Slack and I'd bring them back, and it'd be basically one big stand-up routine while also celebrating our wins and checking in on the goals. And the first three times it was amazing. People loved it, and it was a surprise, right? And then by the third time, people expected it. And as soon as something becomes an expectation, as soon as it becomes scheduled, and this is why like Friday happy hours don't work. Like this stuff doesn't work because it's expected. You have to create the unexpected. So by the third time, I had this crazy idea. I said, hey, what if we do something totally different? And at the end, we tell people what we're really missing is a quarterly theme. And so we did, my co-founder and I surprised everybody in these like pirate outfits. And we basically came on Zoom and did Pirates of the Caribbean and had this whole like stand-up shtick. And it was probably one of the most memorable moments. Like people still talk about it. And then that kickstarted so many funny things. We had a quarterly theme competition, which probably was one of the funniest meetings I've ever been a part of. We could get into that another time, but if you were there, you know what I'm talking about.
There's something about it being fun and like keeping things fun that feels lost in a lot of companies, and something that can be valuable.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to be serious all the time. Even if you're doing something very serious, like helping people with their healthcare.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's again like our personalities, which is we take our work very seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously at all. And that's the difference. But again, like it just that type of thing does not work when you're in wartime. Like you can't do the silly stuff when you're in wartime. Like there's a different type of culture that needs to show up then. And so, for pretty much all of Rupa's history, we've had up into the right growth. We've had incredible growth. We hit product market fit. Like we were in the good times. And I think in good times, you can do things like this, and it can be fun and exciting and silly and all of these things. And that's kind of what like gets you through the tough times, because people have those bonds with people and people like remember it. But I think that the mistake that some people make is they forget that at the core of this, like you still need that intensity. You still need that like hunger and that willingness to win.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go back to the beginning. Where did the concept of the company come from, or your impetus to start a company?
You're gonna laugh at this. It's because I saw how unhealthy we were in undergrad. Like, I mean, truly, like we went to a school that prized pushing yourself to the extreme. It was, the Wall Street culture of binge working and binge partying and like everything was this like excess and binge. And I got really sick freshman year, and that kind of kickstarted my own personal health journey. And I realized pretty early on, and when we were in college, like wellness was not cool at all. It was not a thing. And I realized like there is a whole version of human potential that's untapped, because we are basically walking through life kind of half asleep, half alive. And what would happen if we changed that? And so that was my entire focus. I mean, I in college, I think my junior year summer, I wrote down on a piece of paper, I was like, I'm going to build a company that's going to fundamentally improve the standard of living, like what it means to be alive for every person on the planet. That was the goal. And so I came out to the West Coast and just kind of explored what was happening in the health and wellness space. And this was 2012, 2013, and it just kind of snowballed into Rupa. But there were so many little things along the way. I think this idea that you decide you want to start a company and then you get the idea and then you start the company, like that's not really how it works. How it works is like it's born out of an obsession that happens over many years and maybe is developing in you right now and you might not even realize it. And if you look back, there's so many little things that had brought me to that moment, but you can't manufacture it. It has to be born from like a true obsession.
Were you obsessed when we were in that D school class? Because we were doing like if you remember for the listeners as well, this designing for behavior change in like a healthcare context and thinking about chronic conditions. And I remember we had a group project where we're designing for different individuals personalized plans. Were you obsessed with this idea at that point?
It wasn't this idea, but yeah. So basically like that obsession drove me to even seek out this D school class. And the D school class was like super pivotal, because that was the moment I realized that there is opportunity for health and wellness and, at that time, it's like longevity wasn't really in the zeitgeist, but like that, those concepts in personalized medicine, there was space for that in the medical world. Like we were actually working with physicians who cared about this stuff. And I think at that time, most physicians did not, but we were exposed to this world that had this little opening, and that really changed my life.
Yeah, yeah. It was a different kind of medicine from the corporate practice or the academic practice, and kind of thinking
Yeah.
more holistically about the patient and personalizing care. When did you go out to raise the first round, and what was the pitch?
The pitch. So we this is like one of those classic crazy, you know, Silicon Valley stories of just all these things happening to manifest into a round, right? Like it just you can't make this stuff up, and it is a joint effort of like the tribe that you put around you. Anyway, so that's my preamble. But basically what had happened was we had taken this D school class together, and then when I decided to start Rupa, because I'd gone to go join a different startup, I left that after 6 months. A friend actually had a high school friend had died in a car accident, and I kind of got this moment. I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I need to go do the thing that I actually want to do, which was this. And I ended up working for a company called Parsley Health. And then that led me to the idea for Rupa and building infrastructure for this kind of next generation of personalized medicine. And then when it came time to kind of put it out in the world, like when you're starting a company, you're kind of alone and no one's watching what you do. You're not being pulled by customers yet. And so it's really easy to just go on and on and on without any, working without actually like producing anything. And so I gave myself some pretty strict timelines. And there was a moment where I just said, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tell everybody I know that I'm starting this company and just see what happens from there. So what had happened is I emailed our old professor and said, hey, I'm starting this company. And at that time, it wasn't anything. It was me and $10,000 of savings. That was it. And he said,
This is
that's awesome.
Dennis. You emailed
Yeah,
Dennis.
Dennis. Yeah. I emailed Dennis. And it was basically like, he emailed me back and he said, awesome. Like, we're having an alumni day. You should come and talk about the company. And I said, great. What I didn't realize is he thought that it was a real company already. And it was like a pitch day for recruiting. And like I didn't have any money. I didn't even have a company. And so I ended up going, and if you remember, like the class was pretty like full of med students and undergrads, and like all business school students, like all different types of people, but people who were probably a little bit more conservative in their, health and wellness perspectives than the stuff I was doing that was more in the functional medicine space. And so I ended up pitching alongside Omada and Livongo, which were pretty like large healthcare companies at that time. And at the end of it, they both said, hey, we're hiring. And so I kind of jokingly said, oh, and by the way, I'm hiring. Didn't mean anything from it other than a joke. And I think, again, this is like personality. And after the class like ended, the entire class swarmed me and said, this is the type of company we want to work for. And I was just totally surprised. And then, from there, a handful of people actually reached out. And then that's basically where I met my co-founder, Rosa. She was in the class, and like all of these things came together. At that time, she had, and I'm getting the fundraising part, but this is the whole impetus for even fundraising. She had an offer to do healthcare consulting. And she was also presenting her medical research around the world that summer. And she was graduating from Stanford. And it was a whole thing. And something in me just said, turn down this very secure healthcare consulting offer and just come join me. I don't have any money to pay you, but I will figure it out by the time you come back from the summer. And so that's, to her credit, she did. She turned down the healthcare consulting offer. After meeting me twice, she accepted this offer to come join me to build this company. And I told her, this was May, and I said, when you come back in August, I will have found money to pay you. And she's going to work for free in the middle. And so, it's end of July, and I'm like, I need to probably think about raising money. And Rose is coming back in a few weeks. Like I should figure this out. So as one does, I go to a Tony Robbins conference to get pumped up so that I can go like raise money. And in the middle, like right before I head out on my plane, I end up like a few days before, my brother had wanted me to go to this, comedy festival. And I was like super serious about work. I didn't do anything for fun. Like I was just so intense about it. And he basically dragged me out. He bought me this like ticket and he said, you have to come with me. So I like kind of grumbled and went to this like comedy thing in San Francisco. And there we ran into this friend of a friend who was from Texas, who we hadn't seen in a while, named James Bashara. Anyway, and so fast forward like 2 weeks later, turns out that James Bashara had just sold his company to Airbnb and he wanted to help founders raise money. Like this was the thing. And I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Like it was just so serendipitous in terms of the timing. And so he said, Tara, I told him I just showed up at his house. I told him what I was doing. And he said, I believe in this. And at that time, it was just, hey, there's a whole world of integrative and functional healthcare, and I want to bring that to people. This is the next wave of medicine. And it was that was 2018, before it was really in the zeitgeist. And he got it, to his credit. And he said, I want to help you raise money for this. And he became my personal fundraising coach. And so I basically tried to raise a real seed round off of our initial prototype, which was helping people find acupuncturists in the Bay Area. Like it was that product, and it was not anything special. And it was like very, very janky prototype. Thought it would be easy to go raise a $2 to $3 million seed, $2 million seed. Got very close, but did not make it. And ended up just raising a 400K pre-seed, but it was enough to pay Rosa. And so to me, that was a win. And then you can talk about more later, but I think like the big things in this are like, how do you got to have that hunger and that need to, why am I even fundraising? Like, what's the point of this? And how much do I actually need? And how do I keep going past all the rejections to get to a place where I'm going to be okay? And then, you find all these people along the way who help you out and totally change the trajectory of your life.
How many people did you have to pitch to raise that 400K?
I completely switched strategies. So first I pitched probably like 25 people for the seed round. And then we got very close with Floodgate at the seed, with Mike Maples at Floodgate. And then at the end, he was like, it's a little too early for us. And he ended up putting a 50K pre-seed check in. And so that's when I was like, okay, and James had already committed the first check. And so I was really honored by that. He's like, I want to be the first check and I want to help you. And so he seeded it. And then basically what he told me to do, which was brilliant in retrospect, was he said, to do the rest, like you have me, you have Mike, like there was a handful of other people who'd said they wanted to put a little bit of money in. And I really didn't have a big network at that time. So it's not like I could just text people and they would give me money. It was completely different. And he said, what you should do is say, I'm raising a, $250, basically like, I'm raising X amount and I'm already almost like more than 50% of the way allocated. Like you want to pick an amount and say that you're already over 50% and do it via text and say, no pressure, but I'm saving you a spot. Let me know in the next day or two if you want a spot, a 4 million valuation or something like that as a pre-seed. And so instead of actually doing meetings, I just went back to the advisors who I'd asked for help, like friends and family, like anybody. And at that point, it was like really just anybody who wanted to believe in me. And I just texted them, and probably within an hour, we'd finish the round.
That's pretty good. So that strategy that James gave you worked out really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did that change your trajectory then? You had 400K, you could pay Rosa. What did you go to between that and the next round?
That really gave us hey, okay, we're starting. And by the way, we tried to, we applied to YC. We almost got in, didn't get in. I mean, like there's just so many of these. We tried everything. And I think that like people don't realize that. They just see these like success stories and they don't realize like all of the failures and like uncertainties along the way. And the number of people who've now come back to me and be like, oh my God, we made such a big mistake, like blah, 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 blah. It was completely different because I'm actually very grateful we didn't get the $2 million seed or the $3 million seed, because I found that one of the most important things is if you have too much money in the beginning, it distracts you because suddenly you're on a clock. Like if you actually raise a real round before you have product market fit, you're on a clock. We needed to kind of like putz our way around for the first year and a half, finding product market fit. And we were able to do that because we didn't have pressure. We didn't have like VC pressure. Like raising a seed round was completely different because they're looking for the markups at the A and they're on a timeline and they're wanting to it's just completely different. And so in retrospect, it was such a blessing. And I would never go out and try to raise a substantial amount of money unless we had product market fit again for the next company. And I think that was, again, like life gives you these lessons and kind of just, sometimes we just need to go with them. But what ended up happening was we ended up finding product market fit in that 400K. There was a crazy moment where we hit product market fit and then COVID hit. I mean, it was literally January 2020, a few weeks before we hit product market fit, and then COVID hit and we thought the entire business was going to tank. And another one of our amazing pre-seed investors, Eric Bond at Hustle Fund, they came in, they'd seen our traction. He'd worked with me like closely, and they said, "Hey, we want to do a 250K check and like to hold you over until you can actually wait." Because we were going to go raise a seed round, and then Sequoia, literally, I was going to go out to raise a seed round. I built out our investor list. I was sending the emails out the next day. And that night, Sequoia sent out their Black Swan, COVID's a Black Swan event email. And the industry shut down. And I was so upset because I was like, oh my gosh, we got all the way here. And now I'm not going to get to raise that round that I wanted to raise. And then Hustle Fund came in. We took their 250K. It was essentially a bridge. We did it at a 8 million valuation. He was trying to get us in at like 6 or 7. And I was like, and it was funny because he said, oh yeah, Tara, like, with COVID, like you're never going to get, there's not going to be higher valuations like coming. Like this is it. And I just felt so certain in what we were doing. And so like I negotiated to an 8 or an 8.5 or something like that. But then, that was February 2020. And then I think in June is when the market started to like kind of creep back, and we were on this insane growth trajectory. And when we decided to raise, we ended up raising our seed round at a $22.5 million valuation. And everybody's jaw at that time was really high, and everybody's jaw just dropped. And I was like, I told you, that this was going to be. So it's a little bit of, we kind of had to take what we could get, but in the end, it all worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you raised that small bridge, were you already seeing enough evidence to have that conviction, or was it more conviction just based on your belief in the market? Like, did you have
Evidence? Yeah,
the
it
traction?
was basically like the pre-seed was belief in me, and nothing else. Every other round was a metrics round. And I think that fundraisers can really only be one of two things. Like it is either a story, vision, founder, like that kind of pitch, or it is a numbers and all the other stuff pitch.
Yeah. So you raised that round, I guess, later in 2020. Then that was like a proper seed, and then you raised another round in 2021, and that was some of the same investors, but you also added, I think, first round in that round.
2020, our seed was first round. First round, Lackey Groom, a bunch of other people came in on that one, but first round was the lead, who had been my dream investor, and so I was very, very excited about that. And then, and I'm very happy we went with them. And it's funny because like Floodgate then wanted to actually lead the seed again. And I was like, where were you last time? No, they're amazing. I don't hold any grudges at all for the stuff. Is just, I think what people don't realize is investors only make 2 to 4 investments a year, and they come across, generally speaking, and they come across hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of investments like a month. And so it's not, you can't take this stuff personally. And I think it's ridiculous when people have grudges against people who rejected that. Like life's too short. But first round came in our seed, and then about a year later we raised our A, and that was Bessemer.
Were those rounds significantly easier then, given you had traction up and to the right, or did you still have to go out and pitch a lot of people and do a lot of storytelling, even though you had the traction?
I think that they were each difficult in their own way. So pre-seed was difficult because nobody believed in the industry at all and understood it, and we had zero traction. Like I think it was really the industry, because that's the whole point of a seed round or a pre-seed round. It's like to believe when there's no reason to believe, kind of, and to understand the vision. And it was really hard because most people did not see it. At the seed round, people kind of saw it, but they really understood the numbers, and that's what convinced people. And at the A, people were like, oh, okay, I think this is going to be a thing, but I don't know how to, how the business model might work. And then later on, people were like, you guys saw the future and we want in on this. And so they're various, but I think they were each hard for different reasons. The seed was hard because I'd never done it before. And so I had no idea how to raise a round. We ended up, I think, raising like a $5 million round. And at that time, that was like a large seed round. And I just didn't know how to think about valuations and allocation and types of investors we wanted. There's a steep learning curve. And so, yes, people were excited, but it wasn't like no fundraises everybody's a hell yes and it's really easy and you just keep going forward, right? You're going to get a bunch of rejections. And I'm really grateful for the first person who actually gave me a term sheet, who believed in us hardcore. His name is Sean Doolin. At that time, he was at Global Founders Capital. Now he has his own firm, but he just believed in us in a way that gave me, I don't know, that first person who writes you a term sheet, because everybody else, it's easy to follow after that, but to be the first investor who does it takes a lot of guts, especially if you're not a seasoned investor, especially if it's your early on. And so I'm really grateful to him. We ended up having like 9 term sheets that seed round or something crazy like that, like absolutely insane. So we got to kind of pick our terms, which was awesome. But again, so many learnings. I didn't even know how to negotiate a term sheet. So they're all hard for their own reasons.
That's a lot of term sheets. Sean's a great guy. Sean's a good friend, and he ended up investing while at GFC, even if he didn't lead the round, right?
Yeah, yeah. I like to reward the early ones and the guts, and so we gave him a bit of allocation.
That's awesome. And so the seed round, you were learning, all the processes involved in terms of negotiating these term sheets, figuring out how you're going to put a round together, probably the intricacies of the legal documents and all that kind of stuff. How did that change from seed to Series A? What was the learning at Series A?
I mean, Series A is just on a different magnitude, and it's a different level of corporate oversight, let me put it that way, like control. And the one thing I personally have optimized for is I'm not a price optimizer. I'm a decisions optimizer. Like I need to be able to make quick decisions for the company, and I need to be able to like make it. And so we didn't have a board at the seed. I was hesitant about a board at the A and like what that would mean, but I got really comfortable with it, and now I'm like very grateful for it because of our Series A investor, but had to get my head around that and just a lot of the protective provisions and things like that. I'm the person who will read every single line and like negotiate the term sheet. And I think I maybe fortunately, unfortunately got a reputation for that. But I think that it's something that more people should do. I've also like, I'm not a big, like when people ask me like, oh, you're a female founder. I'm like, no, I'm just a founder. But this is one area where I've heard over and over and over, like women tend to not negotiate their term sheets as hard or like read every single line item. And I'm such a believer in going through every line, knowing what it's going to mean, knowing what the waterfall is going to look like. And especially now that we had our exit, like the stuff matters and it really can change the outcomes. And so highly, highly recommend everybody do that. But so the Series A was just on a different level of, hey, I mean, everything from, do I need to run every single exec offer by the board for approval? Like, do I not? Like, all of that stuff. And then who gets, veto access on what? Like, all of that stuff. The one thing I learned early on, and I'm very grateful to first round, is when investors give a term sheet and they say, oh, it's just standard and it's only two numbers are different. It's the amount and the valuation. It's a standard term sheet otherwise. It's like one page, very simple. That is in the founder's worst interest because there is basically at the time of a term sheet is the time when you have the most leverage to negotiate. Once you sign that term sheet, you basically are in this exclusive relationship where the investor has pretty much all the power and the know-how, and then you're doing the docs. And so what I really credit First Round to is they have a 7-page term sheet that outlines all of the most important terms. And I think that it is just so founder friendly to talk about all of those things and to negotiate them up front. And I'm very grateful for that because it actually set us up from the beginning to have docs, because every round your docs are going to be based on the prior round's docs. And so the first one is like super, super important. And I think this is another tip that I got that I thought was really helpful was there's a lot of reasons to do like a price round versus a safe. And people choose one or the other depending on how they want to structure the round. But one of the reasons to do one of the situations in which to do price round versus a safe is when you have leverage. Like if you don't really have leverage, probably go with a safe. But if you have leverage in the negotiation, go with the price round, because at that time you can actually negotiate the terms of the deal, which will then be the basis for the future terms of the deal for the rest of your company's history.
That's really good advice. That's really, really thoughtful. So it sounds like you figured out these things before you ended up signing the term sheet, you got all that stuff negotiated, you got the board put into place. But through the process, it ended up being an asset, or ended up being something you're grateful for, if I think I heard you correctly.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for all that. And to be clear, I learned this stuff through the process. Like there is no learning it before. It's just like learning by doing.
What did it, I guess, what's a surprise that you had with the board, or something that you didn't expect that you're grateful for now that everything's played out?
Okay, so our Series A, the initial term sheet we got from Bessemer was the lowest term sheet we got out of everybody in our Series A. And I remember talking to Josh Koppelman at first round about this, and he said, Tara, Jeremy, I wasn't expecting. I like Bessemer wasn't even on my radar. To be totally honest, I thought of them as like an older, stodgy firm, which as I didn't think would be like a good personality fit for me, which is funny. Like don't go by reputations, like go by the people, which is a great lesson for me. But I had met, I had known Talia from Bessemer from undergrad, from college, and she had told me, she said, just meet my partner Jeremy, just meet him. And I didn't really know who he was. And so I just hopped on the call, and I think I'm very grateful that I didn't know who he was, because I might have had expectations had I known who he was. But he hopped on the call, and it was just, when you're talking to somebody who is insanely brilliant. And he was the person who spotted the trends early. Like he was just very thoughtful. He had, like, one of the things we talked about was like market size. And he said, Tara, the best companies don't just go after large markets. The best companies actually create large markets. Like they're the ones that are actually creating the market. And I'm like, yes, exactly. And that's what I see happening here. And he just kind of got it. And I really, really enjoyed my time with him. And I remember looking him up afterwards and realizing he's, one of the goats of investing. And I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. And I called Josh Koppelman afterwards, and he said, yeah, Jeremy's great, but they're going to give you the worst price. Like, just be ready for that. If you're fine with that, then great. But like, they're not going to give you a good price. And sure enough, when the term sheet came, it was the lowest we had. We literally had a term sheet for almost double the amount of what the Bessemer term sheet was. And so, it like really forces you to ask, like, what do you want? And by the way, the term sheet that was for almost double had basically me in complete control of everything. No board if I didn't want it, like just, completely founder friendly. And it was also from a great name. So there was really, no, how do you compare these things versus going with, a firm that for whatever reason, I think people have their own reputations of firms in their head, which is really funny. And everybody has a different one, but I was like, that's much kind of like old school. But it had all these protective provisions, and like there was a board, and so I was going to have a board scene. Like I have to ask her to do all these different things, and it was such a tough decision. But at the end of the day, I ended up going with Bessemer and Talia and Jeremy and Sophia and Steve, because they understood what I was trying to do with the business in a way that other people didn't. I think one downfall of having great metrics is that everybody's excited about great metrics, but they might have their own story as to what the company's doing. And I realized, like, I don't want to keep bringing somebody back on track of what my vision is. Like I need somebody who like understands my vision and helps move me forward. And then, to be honest, like even right after I did the deal, like I didn't know if I made the right choice. But then in my gut, I was like, I think this is the right choice, but it kind of made no sense when you're looking at it from the outside. You're like, why did you take? We negotiated it up for sure. Like we could not have accepted that first offer. We negotiated it up. Josh Koppelman was very surprised by how far we got it up. Like that was all good. But it didn't come until later when I realized, like, this is somebody on my team. Like, 2 months in, I gave Talia a complete data dump of our data, and she built a presentation for me on how to think about success of the business and what it would be like, how we should think about our key metrics. And she isolated them. I mean, it was amazing. Like she was essentially my partner in doing this. And I'm very grateful for that. And now after going through this exit, just the partnership through it all, I'm so happy that we went with them.
Was there a big delta between the relationship or the rapport that you were able to build with them and some of the other firms? Was that a big deciding factor in addition to just them having a lot of healthcare expertise?
Interestingly, we were Talia's first healthcare company, and I didn't actually know her that well in college. I knew her husband, but I actually didn't know her that well. And so it was fundraising, this weird thing where you meet all these people and you're trying to figure out who you want to spend the rest of your life with, right? It's like it's an arranged marriage in some sense, which, the parents actually have a great marriage, which is a whole other story. But after knowing each other for 15 minutes and being like, okay, cool. But I there's only one person who, because we ended up raising another undisclosed round that was led by first round Bessemer, and then we brought in Fred Wilson at USV. And Fred's the only person who has had a significant stake in Rupa who I haven't known for years. I had known Todd Jackson at first round for a couple of years before he was an angel investor. I had known Talia for many years. And then Fred, and then, James, I had also known James Ferrara in our pre-seed. I'd known him. And I think that, like, what I realized is at the end of the day, I actually ended up picking people who I had multiple data points on. And so it wasn't just the like rapport with people, because there's a lot of people who you can have great rapport with in the 3-week process of a fundraise. It was the consistency of those data points and like knowing who they are.
That seems not uncommon. Not everyone has that opportunity, but when you do have that opportunity, people do seem to defer to that.
I used to be staunchly in the camp of don't talk to investors unless you're fundraising. And now I'm like absolutely not in that camp. I fundamentally believe like everybody does better with more data points.
Yeah, this is a question I was going to ask. It's on my list. So let's move into some of those. So definitely, yeah, you seem to be in the camp of build relationships before you're fundraising, get to know people. What are some other creative or non-obvious fundraising strategies that you've learned over the years?
I think I've actually flip-flopped on a lot of my original strategies, partly because I think the market's changed. So first off is everything has to be done in the context of your business, where it is right now, and the market. Like I would in today's market, I would actually fundraise completely differently than I did in 2021 versus 2018 or whatever. I mean, it's just completely different. And I think maybe some like, some strongly held beliefs around this is the whole, some people say, don't ask for money. No, ask for money, get advice, ask for advice, get money twice. Some people like, hey, Pitbull. And I actually used to really believe that. But now I realize like, people just respect the straight up. And it isn't until you give people a deadline that they will make a decision. And like you can just wander in the desert forever having conversations unless you run the process. And so I think it's a little bit of like, yeah, I know tons of founders who have had a process, swung, missed, but that doesn't mean they stopped. Like they figured out alternate sources of funding. Like you kind of just do whatever it takes, but your time is so precious, and just to keep going and having like kind of these like advicey conversations, not helpful. If you're actually trying to fundraise, just try to fundraise. That's it. Second is firm matters, brand matters, and people matter. I think especially in the last few years, there's been an influx of investors who are new to investing or who have started micro funds. And there's a lot of capital, but I've seen so many people actually leave their firms. And then the company is kind of left without the champion at that firm, and it becomes very difficult. And so, Talia's been a Bessemer for 10 plus years. Fred's been at USV for, I don't know, 25 years. Who knows how long he's been there. Todd was newer to first round, but I also worked with Josh. But Todd also was a first round founder. Like he's part of that community. And so I think it's like, you got to find people who are actually excited to be an investor. I think there's a lot of people who are kind of fair weather investors. So just be thoughtful about that. And then the last piece is like, I believe in finding like building your group of people. So our board was Talia from Bessemer, Todd Jackson from first round, and Fred Wilson from USV. It was amazing because all three of them are very different human beings. And they have very different strengths. And I think that it's, Fred's not the person who he actually he spent like an hour a week with me, which was amazing. And, but, he is the person who is strategy, big picture. He's not going to like sit down next to me and like do, dive into the details in the same way like Talia and Todd are. Like the success of Rupa is highly correlated to Todd and Talia's like future and their career. And so I think that there's a lot of question on, do I go with kind of a newer partner, or do I go with somebody who's like brand name established? And I think truly it's like they both can be helpful, but if I had to pick one, I think the newer partner, but make sure that you want somebody hungry and somebody who has, something to lose, but make sure that they have proven that they are an investor and they're going to stick with investing.
I want to go back through actually each of the rounds and just kind of talk about the timelines. One thing that we always talk about with founders is how long to expect for the process to take.
Yeah,
If you recall, like how long did it take you to go from start to finish on your pre-seed round?
probably a month. That one was like shorter, maybe 6 weeks, but like probably a month.
What about the seed round?
So the interesting thing is that all of my rounds, and this probably says something about me, very short from, conversation to term sheet, but then term sheet negotiation was long, and then the deal negotiation was long. Like I actually spent a lot of time on those. And so probably 3 months in total for each, but beginning to getting a term sheet, probably a few weeks. And then term sheet negotiation might have been another few weeks. And then the docs maybe took like 2 months. Yeah.
Did you like just stack a ton of pitches and conversations in those first few weeks then?
Yes, but not, you can't do too many. Otherwise
Mhm.
you will burn out, not follow up with people, like that kind of stuff. I think it's super important to actually pace yourself. So like, 4 a day, 5 day
Yeah.
maybe.
That's a
And
good clip.
remember, by the way, I was doing all this in COVID. So I've never, I don't know, what do I do with my hands when I fundraise in person? I've like actually never done that.
It's the same thing as when you're on Zoom, right? You got to put your hands somewhere.
It was really interesting. Like, I mean, most days I'd be like in my pajamas fundraising. You just couldn't tell.
I remember you were also like, I don't know if you still are, big on the hot tub life. Did you ever like do a pitch from the hot tub?
Definitely phone calls. I don't know that I've done an investor pitch from the hot tub, but there have been many other meetings that have been, that have been taken there.
Taking the work from home to the next level.
Exactly, exactly. Heat shock therapy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Through this whole journey, you've spent 6 years or so building this company, getting to an exit. Looking back, what do you think you're the best at? What is your superpower?
I want to say one other thing about the exit piece. A lot of people wanted to put more money in Rupa at higher valuations. Once you get over 200 million, you're kind of in this interesting area of valuation. You're kind of in this like interesting position of, okay, now how do I like what's my exit strategy? Like I need to be really confident that I'm going to go X, take it public, or there's going to be an acquirer who can, do this at that 500, 700, 800, billion-dollar valuation, whatever it is. And I am very glad that we didn't accept that money. We didn't need it. We had, our last round we didn't actually announce, but was basically first round wanting to put more money in, and then investment wanted to put more money in, and then we brought on USV and Fred, and we brought them in. So we didn't actually ever do a massive round after that. That was our undisclosed round. But I'm very glad that we didn't take more money and end up kind of in this like dead zone of valuation, because our waterfall would have looked very different. And our waterfall ended up being very life-changing for lots of people at the company. And I think that it would have been completely different if we had taken that extra round. And it would have turned something from a success into kind of like, okay, like we exited. And I've just talked to so many founders now who are in that position, and it's definitely a choice.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of folks who are in that situation, taking like a very high valuation growth round, and then they have a overhang of a liquidation preference to deal with, and the waterfall looks really messy then.
Yeah, it's really tough. It's really tough. Okay, but you asked like what am I best at?
Yeah, what's your superpower? What have you found that to be?
I I used to joke about this, but I actually think that this is it, which is being a very fast learner. Like pretty much every weekend. So my schedule is like I work pre-product market fit 7 days a week. Post-product market fit, it is 6 days a week of like actual tactical work, and then 1 day a week of like working on me. And so basically it's like, what am I through the week? I'm like, what do I need to learn? Like, what's a skill I need to learn? What is my bottleneck? And on Saturdays, I'll go figure that out. And like that's like I was very antisocial through the entire process. Like just did not like zero social life for 6 years. And I was happy with that, by the way. Like I think it's a choice. Like I don't feel bad about that at all. Like that's what I wanted. But it's learning really, really quickly and up leveling myself, because Rupa was the biggest company I've ever worked for. I didn't know what HR was. I didn't know what like any of these things are. I was just so new to companies in general, and I'd never really worked for a company full time before, which is crazy to say. And so you have to be the master of figuring it out. And I think that that is my number one skill. And then, maybe a little bit of like winging it and stand-up comedy too.
That's helpful, keeping it light. What's been the thing that you've had to develop the most or like learn the most to get to here?
Everything. I'm a completely different person than when I started. And to me that is the best gift of doing a startup is you basically it's your own personal development journey, and you just become the kind of person that you want to be ideally, because you don't have time to do anything that's not worth your time. And so I'm a completely different person in every way. I think the biggest learning curves, maybe I'll put like the hardest learning curves for me were the people stuff. Probably like most founders, I patience is not something I'm very good at. And so, like slowing down for the human, like that aspect of it. And I can't, and I think this is like one of the things I definitely need to work on, or like need to surround myself with the right people. But it's essentially, if someone's not performing, I just kind of like move on. And it's a little bit of I say this, and I need to, for the next company, like I need to figure this out. But like I'm not a manager, I'm a leader. And I think that that is coming in. I thought I had to be a manager too, and then I realized like that's not my job. My job is to like make sure that this company is successful. And embracing that, I think, was one. I did that much more so towards the end. But in the beginning, I thought I had to be like great at everything, and that included management. And so, I'm not. The jury's still out on that, because obviously you want great people to want to work with you, but it's probably a huge learning curve for me.
Yeah. And to clarify that, I think what you're saying, like leadership is setting direction and tone and pace. Management is getting the best out of your team. Is that like a fair distinction?
It's a little bit like one of my direct reports asked me, "Do you want us to manage our team the way you manage us?" And I said, "Oh no, absolutely not. I want you to actually be people managers, where you're coaching people, where you are getting the best out of them in certain ways." I think my way of getting the best out of my leads is very different. What I expect out of an executive team is actually very different than what we expect out of the layers below that. And so, by definition, like my relationship with my direct reports is different than their relationship with their direct reports. And I don't think that, like for example, like I don't just do one-on-ones to have one-on-ones. Like we're either getting stuff done, or we're building a relationship, or like we're solving some problem. Like something is happening. And that doesn't mean it's always all work all the time. Like I do dinners with my direct reports to get to, just so we can like talk about stuff and have that human connection. It's not about not having the human connection, but it's a little bit of like, I expect you to just do your job, and I'm not here to tell you how to do that.
Yeah, yeah. There's no like growing into your role when you report to the CEO. You kind of have to just do the job. That's something that yeah, has been tossed around a lot in some conversations I've been in, and also thinking about what is it that you can do as a CEO managing someone in a function that you've not done before. You can't manage them. They need to just do and be an expert at finance or product or whatever it is.
And I'm not going to tell you how to report up to me. I just need you to figure it out and report up to me, like that kind of thing.
What's something that you see founders doing that you now know they shouldn't be doing?
Hiring before they have product market fit, raising too much and too high valuations. Like it's so cliche, but it's so true. I mean, so many things. Like a lot of these are mistakes I've made. The hardest one is, yeah, it's obvious to like fire fast, right? Like that's very obvious. It's like, who's gonna say no, you should fire slow? Like be really slow with underperformers. Like no one says that. Then why does everybody say that they don't fire people fast enough? And I think the reason is like, for early stage companies, you get stuck in this conundrum where you have one person in the role who's managing a lot of different things, and you are underwater as the CEO or founder. And then if you let that person go, you have to like figure out how to fill that role. And by the way, it's not like you have a fully staffed recruiting team with tons of people in the pipeline, right? It's like that's empty. You have to now go take over those responsibilities. And so you're like, you know what? It's better just to like keep an underperformer there. And, I'm going to like kind of search for somebody on the side, or I'm going to go deal with this other problem. And that's just never been like the right answer for me. And I've made that mistake so many times where it's, no, you actually just need to go fire that person, and you will figure it out. The organization will figure it out. It'll be fine. You will survive it, but you need to get that person out, because they're going to do tons and tons of damage. And I think that the reason why people don't do that is because you don't have somebody in the pipeline. And so the best defense is a good offense. Is that the line? I don't know. I shouldn't use sports analogies. But but it's the only way around that I realized is to actually have built a brand and a company that people want to work for. Why can Elon just go fire people whenever? It's because there's like a bajillion people ready to like come be the next person in line. You need to build your version of that because otherwise you're going to be waiting 6 months, a year to fill that role. And so I can't stress it enough. Like the, you know, the mainstream press for startups is dying. Everybody, founders need to go direct. You need to be out there. You need to show who you are to the world. And this isn't just like go build a big audience for the sake of like having a ton of followers. It's not that at all. It's that if you're trying to convince somebody to like leave their cushy, high paying job or whatever it is to make their life change, to come work for you, and you need to have those people in the pipeline and ready to go, it's the same thing as investors. You need them to have data points on you. And so you need to show who you are like to the world, and you need to have multiple data points that people can like assess for you. And so I think too many people wait way too long to fire people. And we hear this, fire fast. We hear that saying all the time, but the reason we don't do it is because we don't have people who we can easily fill that role for, and we're doing a million other things. And the reason we don't have people that we can't fill that role for is because we haven't created that pipeline. We haven't created that pipeline because we are stuck in the traditional way of recruiting, which is like get a recruiter, have them reach out to people. But my advice would be like, go direct, start to build the brand, like the brand of the company, your personal brand. Like it's easier now than ever. And it's super, super important to do.
We always talk about being sales versus marketing for the first few hires, right? You're not going to get people
100%.
Coming inbound on your listings or your postings. You've really got to go outbound to your network and find people.
This is like that is the thing that most people like. People don't realize like it's exactly what you said. Like repeat that 10 times. Like that needs to be drilled into people.
Tell me more about how you guys built that team then. How did you build the first core of the team?
So random. I'm a big believer in putting yourself out there and letting the serendipity happen. Like you don't, unless you put yourself out in the world, nothing is going to happen. So I would literally post on Instagram. I sent one of the first things I did for the company was send an email about my life update to every single person who could even be like remotely. You probably got this email.
I remember this. Yeah.
And just the responses to that, like you need to stay top of mind for people. And so you're always, as a founder, you're always selling, always. And so how do you keep doing that? It's exhausting for some people. You can't outsource it. It has to be authentic. It has to come from you. And so you got to do this. So our first, I told you how I met Rosa, which was the random email to the professor who invited me to come to the class, who then like the whole thing. The next person was one of our lab partners had this like sales rep who I talked to, and I was like, you're actually very smart. And so I asked her to teach me how to do sales. And then she got laid off in COVID, and I called her up and said, how about you come work for us instead? And then like you just kind of build these relationships, you spot this talent. I don't think she would have done it because she made less money working for us because we were so poor at that time than she would have made on unemployment. But that goes to show like the type of person who would do that, and now she's had an incredible experience. She like runs one of the largest teams at Rupa, like just amazing. But it came from that. And then the other person was somebody who just like randomly came in on Angel List, and we just like gave him a chance. But the reason we had so many posts, we posted a job description on Angel List, and people would post these like serious job descriptions, and ours was general startup hustler, and it had all of this like it just had who we are in it, and it just attracted the right type of person. And I think like that's a lot of what it is. It's the sales versus marketing, but you got to create sales materials that make you stand out.
Let's talk a little about that, actually. I feel like you guys did some very innovative things in working with your customers. We talk about the conference strategy, but I've gotten so many emails about webinars for Rupa, and I almost signed up for one just because I'm like, I need to know what's going on here. Tell me more about some of the sales strategies you guys use or marketing strategies.
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Again, highly dependent on your audience. But I'll tell you about like the first one. So we sell to healthcare practitioners who generally operate in small clinics or solo practitioners. So anybody from doctors to nurses to nutritionists to acupuncturists to whatever. And the first thing I did was I hired somebody abroad to basically scrape a directory that I found online of highly targeted practitioners that had, it was like a find a practitioner like directory, and you had email addresses, and I just had somebody like scrape scrape those emails and put them in a spreadsheet. And then I personally, from my email, not like using a HubSpotty tool, like just personally, I like mail merged probably like 100 of the doctors and just sent an email, and it would come from me personally. It was not like Tara Rupa, it was Tara. And it said, hey, I'm starting this company. Here's what we do. And I knew it was going to be a fit for them, for their practice. But in the email, I said, by the way, they're all operating their own SMBs, like they're all solo entrepreneurs. I said, by the way, I used to work at this other company and I've built a clinic before. And I know, like, I'm happy to just chat about that. Even if you're not interested in our product, like if you need help building your clinic, just hop on a Zoom with me. And pretty much like more people took me up on that than they did on the product. But that actually helped us build relationships with customers who then became like huge advocates of what we were doing. And I think it's a little bit of like, really do the things that don't scale. And how do you drive value? Like you can't sell before you give. Like you have to give something before you actually sell. And so that I think went a long way. And probably for like the first couple of years, like I would write our emails and they were very personal. Like I posted photos from my birthday parties as a PS. Like people knew us as people. And I think that like that was a cornerstone in our company, in our brands. Like we I would host, I did all the sales demos in the beginning. And I'd take some from like the Peloton and I'd be in sweaty workout clothes. And if somebody was off video, I'd say, hey, like just hop on video. I don't, and they'd be like, oh, I'm eating or I'm in workout clothes. I'm like, me too, it's totally fine. And I basically forced our customers to like get on video just so we could have this personal relationship. And I think like all too often we think about customers as just kind of like a name or a lead. But if you can create that human connection, for us, that went a really, really long way. And it's uncomfortable to do, but it's so valuable.
Yeah, I think especially so in what you guys were doing in terms of like you're dealing with people's health, right? You're dealing not just with the doctor's business, but obviously that trust needs to be transferable from the patient to the doctor to you guys, and that personal relationship probably went a long way in building that trust.
Totally, totally. And then to your point, like the media aspect of it, we are B2B to C, but we sell to these clinics, but it actually looks a lot like consumer because these practitioners, they're on Instagram, and this was the trend that people didn't see coming, which I was like, this personalized medicine, holistic medicine trend is happening through social media. That is like people are sharing stories. Like that's where we need to create our own content. We need to create our own media platform. And so I've always been big on really high quality content. And so we then ended up building like our magazine. We built a podcast. We built our lab reference guide where you can go research all the different lab tests that are available. We built for SEO. We built a big Instagram. We've all of these different platforms. We built our education. We built live classes like the webinars you're talking about, and we built boot camps, like all of these things. And it's all around education. I think all content should either be educational, inspirational, or comedic, like entertainment. And if you're not doing one of those things, if you're just trying to sell, like you're not going to get very far. And so pick your angle. And most companies should probably be on the educational side, unless like inspiration or entertainment is actually entertainment might be a good one for some people. But for us, it was education. So every single thing we did, we never sent an email that was come do this thing, like come sign up for this. It was always, especially in the beginning, here's what we can help you with. Oh, and by the way, we have this product. Come check it out.
I think there was a time where there was a series of emails you guys were doing around specific tests that were now being like added or available on the platform. And you had these emails that relayed why this test was useful, how people were using it. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes. I mean, at this point, our email list got so big that I'm not even a part of it. It's kind of wild, but we do. Like, I try to post about every new lab that we get on LinkedIn. I try to write a personal story still to this day about why I like it. I write all of my own content. Nobody writes my content for me. Like that's another big one. But yeah, we do that.
Let's talk about the acquisition. How did that happen?
About 2 months into launching our product in 2020, I get an email from the CEO, or sorry, I thought Timmy was in the CEO, co-founder of the company that ended up acquiring us, Fullscript. And I'd known about their company for a while. We'd modeled our business model off of theirs. Like to me, it was like a huge acknowledgement and testament to that we were onto something, that he emailed us within 2 months of launching. And launch, there was no formal launch. We didn't actually do a launch. It was, we gave it to two practitioners in the Bay Area, and it spread word of mouth within a couple months to practitioners in all 50 states. Like it was nuts how quickly it grew. And that's how we knew we had product market fit. But he emailed me and he said, we've been, really excited about the space for some time. Like, let's chat. I love what you guys are doing. And that phone call was, I remember exactly where I was. It was a Saturday. I think he was at the airport. And we ended up just talking about startups and building startups. And I remember hanging up and being like, that is a good dude. And I like this human. And over the years, we've established a relationship. And so by the way, he came to us before our seed round, was like, are you interested in doing something? And then at that time it was a no. And candidly, they've approached us many times. We've kind of talked about how we could partner together so many times. And it wasn't until earlier this year that I just got a phone call and he said, hey, we're serious and we can do this, and now's the right time. And you don't need to say anything, but I'm sending you a term sheet. And that was it. And, I was not expecting it. I knew that this was an interesting partner for us and for so many reasons. But if you'd asked me in April if I was going to sell the company, in a few months, I would have said absolutely not. We're on a tear. All of these amazing things are happening. And so the question was like, do we do this? Do we not? How do we think about this? But it ended up being, in so many ways, the absolute right decision for both companies, and just the way that they have, there's so many things to negotiate, but a big part of it was, what happens to the team? How do we, what happens to the product? What happens to the team? What happens to our legacy? And I think the thing that ended up being, deals only happen when they make sense. They have to kind of make sense. Otherwise, it's too much friction to get to the finish line. And this one just made sense from the very beginning. They were strong where we were weak. We were strong with where they were weak. And it was just a perfect fit in so many ways. And it was the right time. And so it came as a big surprise to me. I was not looking to sell the company. There's no way I would have pursued a deal. But when it came to us, it just made sense.
Did you feel like you had to go shop for alternatives, or did you feel like, no, this is the right fit? Let's just make sure the overall deal is what it should be for both parties.
I mean, I think that I talked about this with our board a little bit. To me, this was obviously the right fit. It was a strategic. I think that it was very clear to me that they could pay a, crazy high price in a way that other people couldn't because of the strategic, synergies. I've now said that word way more than I ever thought I'd say that word, which is uncomfortable. So anyways, but they could pay a value that I just knew no one was going to be able to beat. And to me, it was very obvious. But of course, to our investors, you have a responsibility to kind of help get everybody else aligned around that. And there was a discussion around, okay, do we go to discuss this with other people? Do we hire bankers to do a sale process? How do we think about this? And it was very emotional because the people around the table at Rupa, our board members are very, very involved with Rupa. I've done LP meetings for pretty much everybody. This is a company that has been built with blood, sweat, and tears from everybody around the table. And so it wasn't an easy, obvious decision. It's not like our investors said, hell yeah, let's sell, right? No, is this the right decision? Is it not? How do we think about this? So there's a lot of back and forth.
When you made the decision, how did you feel when you were like, okay, this is locked in?
Emotionally, incredibly sad and bittersweet, because this is the thing that I'm so proud of our team and what we've built. And I also know that we're nowhere near done. And there's just so many amazing things about this company, and just knowing that it's never going to be the same again. But at the same time, it's my heart was bittersweet and sad, but my head was hell yeah, this is totally the right decision. I never imagined myself selling, by the way. I don't think that was even that was not in my head when I started the company. It was just, this is what I want to do, and I'm obsessed with it. I'm going to keep going. And I also think the interesting thing is I love building companies. If I've learned anything, I'm this is my jam and I'm ready to go and let's keep going. I'm ready for the next one. And so it also wasn't a case of like I don't want to do this anymore and I'm out. It truly was it felt like my job as a CEO is to see the future in a way that other people cannot and make the best decision for the aggregate good of the company. And that is including everybody. And that's really hard because the aggregate good of the company is not at the good of every single person involved. It is the aggregate good. And that's my responsibility. And it's to see around corners. And to me, this was like very much the right decision. There had been some like market changes. There had been some new regulation that had come out, and it wasn't going to take effect for a few years. But I think I saw the impact that was going to have. There's just like other things that have changed in the market, and I was like, I think that this is going to be this is going to make sense for us. And knowing that my head understood it, but my heart was kind of sad was a very, very difficult thing. And just knowing that like the team was going to be absolutely shocked. And that was the hard part because people like bleed Rupa.
Were they, yeah, so were people generally kind of in the same mixed set of emotions and thoughts as you, or anyone who have felt differently?
I mean, I think that everybody has their own personal reaction, but on the aggregate whole, I think the word that everybody's used is bittersweet. And it is bittersweet and like, yeah, this is like good in so many ways, and even like financially good and just like all of these things. But we love our life here. And I think like that's the hard part.
So what's next for you?
So this is like, can't make this stuff up. In the middle of negotiating this deal, found out that I'm pregnant with our first kid. Unexpectedly, it's actually hilarious because I was given a fertility tracker to test out as a thing to explore if we want to bring it on the Rupa platform. And it was like, okay, you're not ovulating. Like you're not able to have kids, is what the tracker told me. And then I'm literally on a call with our bankers and our lawyers. I'm like, why do I feel horrible? And then it hits me. I'm like, oh my God, am I pregnant? And I stop at a gas station. I'm driving. I stop at a gas station, take a pregnancy test, thought there was a 1% chance. This is middle of the deal and almost fall over. And so for all the people who have like been through this, like negotiating a very large deal with very high stakes while you're pregnant with your first kid and going through your first trimester and nauseous every day, I feel like I can get through anything now. I'm like, all right, we got this. So that's happening. I'm very committed to the success of like these joint companies. I know that sounds like a political, like I'm very committed to the success, but no, like I actually believe that one of the big reasons why we did this was to combine, in my opinion, like two truly exceptional companies in the space so we can make real massive change in the healthcare industry. A lot of people don't know Fullscript, but they're massive. Together we have nearly $1 billion of revenue. Like it's a really amazing company, and I think that the addition of Rupa and Fullscript together is just going to be so impactful in the space, and I want to see that happen. I also know that my place in the world is to build and create, and so I will probably stay on forever as like an advisor, supporter, all of that. But probably sometime in the near future, we'll be exploring what is next from a technology stop, just from like a startup perspective. Like there's so much exciting stuff happening in the world, and how can I not be stoked about it all and want to go build?
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to find out what that next thing is. Before we wrap up, I've got just a few quick questions for you. It's like our mini lightning round. What's one food you would eat if you could only have it for the rest of your life?
Blueberries.
Easy. Why blueberries?
Oh, I don't know. I just get like it's my favorite food: strawberries, blueberries, pizza, cappuccino, blue bottle cappuccinos. Like I'm a very, but the thing that I could eat ungodly amounts of, it's blueberries and
Yeah.
strawberries. Yeah.
What's the hardest lesson you've had to learn in your career?
No one cares about me. Like not in a bad way,
Mhm.
but you think that everybody's watching you and thinking about you all the time and like seeing all the stupid things you do. And yeah, like people see the stupid things you do, but like everyone is actually obsessed about themselves.
Mhm.
No one actually cares about me. So just show up and do it and make mistakes and it's fine.
Yeah. Just do the thing. Apart from the acquisition, which you've already said was bittersweet in a way, what's been the best moment of your business life?
So many. After we did the Series A, I gave like the first end of quarter presentation. It was this amazing, like joyful experience, like really just funny and all the things. At the end of it, our team surprised me with every single person had handwritten a note and mailed it, and they put it in this like beautiful box. And that was like 3 years ago. I still haven't opened them because I'm afraid I'm gonna get too emotional. But that's like the first and maybe only time I've ever cried in front of my team, and I'm not really a crier, but I was just like so overcome with gratitude and emotions for this like amazing group of people where I don't know, it's just like these little moments when people text me and tell me how much this company has changed their life.
Yeah, that's pretty special. I don't think a lot of
Yeah.
founders can say that.
Oh, and then ATV, if my team ever listens to this, they'll get it, but like ATVing in Costa Rica in the monsoon.
Okay, all right. That's also sounds pretty unique.
Yeah, totally.
Last question for you. Who's helped you the most in your career?
Alex, my husband. I met him. I started Rupa and I was not in the phase where I wanted to be in a relationship. I just wanted to build. And it's like, oh, I just need to, I'm going to date because I find it fun. Like I find meeting people really interesting. And I moved to San Francisco and just, I was like, maybe I'll meet somebody who's a chef or a masseuse or somebody with a value add. And then my first ever Bumble date, I met Alex and I was just like, oh shit, like why is this happening? But I knew on that first day, I was like, oh, this is the guy I'm going to marry. And he knew too. And it was really crazy. And I think that this is not talked about enough because I know so many like women founders specifically who want to, and this was me too, it was like focus on your business and then, and like focus on relationships and stuff later. But truly, the most important decision that I've ever made in my life and that I think anybody will is who do you choose to spend your life with? And I wake up every single day feeling like I am the luckiest person on earth for meeting this human who has been in so many ways like a co-founder to me. When we were pivoting, I remember he was in the middle of he's also a founder, which is we're crazy. He was in the middle of a fundraise and he paused and he took an evening to map out the entire market with me and help me like think through my thoughts. And that was a pivotal moment because that's essentially, 2 steps from how we got to the labs product where we basically completely shut down our other product. And it was like a very emotional time. And he just helped me think through that. And there's been so many moments like that where he's just been my thought partner, support system, all of it. And yes, there are all these people in life who have been insanely helpful. Like I would not have gotten here without the help of I can name 50 people offhand, like just who have fundamentally changed my life and changed the direction of the company. But I am the biggest, strongest like advocate of finding somebody who you can live your life with, who you can build your life with, because that's going to make company building 10x easier.
That's a wonderful answer. Cheers to him, and thank you for joining.
Thanks so much. Good to see you.
Thanks again for tuning in to this episode of Money Moves. If you learned something new or just loved this episode, click below to subscribe. See you next week.